Hey everybody, welcome to a very special bonus webinar we have this month. At the end of May, we're going to have another webinar on deconstructing a feasibility survey, and I know a lot of people are interested in that, but today's bonus webinar is with Slope.io, or just Slope for short, and they do a lot of lab kit supply management things. So I've interviewed Rust, who's the CEO and co-founder, twice. Now I've got James Irvin on, and James, can you let everyone know a little bit about yourself, who you are, and then how you got started with Slope?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you having me on. Background is a little bit different, I think, compared to some of the other people I've met in tech startups. I have 12 years of experience in applied research and development, primarily on the energy side. But along with that, got management experience. Was obviously interested in the process development and the design and putting structure around new processes that had to be developed. Also have a background in the military, up to a company commander with that, and so while I do appreciate the freedom of innovation, I also do enjoy structure as well. And so I've known Rust for quite a few years, and I had an opportunity in late 2016, and Rust had an opening for Slope to begin to put structure around the operations side and the logistics side, and start implementing processes along with quality control. And so it was a really great time for me. It was an interesting opportunity that Slope had, and so really that's how I ended up at Slope.
Very cool. So we're going to go through, I guess you're going to share your screen, James. And while you're
Sure.
doing that, we've got a lot of sites, a lot of CRAs watching, calling in. And then when it gets to YouTube, we've got more of everyone from the clinical research industry. It's still very site heavy, CRA heavy. But we're also going to get into some other vendors, CROs, sponsors looking at it. So once it hits YouTube, and I know you guys have your own podcast too, and you're welcome to rip the audio from here and put it on there, you'll get a whole lot of other stakeholders that are going to be listening, watching. So we'll keep that in mind. And then anyone who's on the live webinar, you can type in questions you have, either for myself or James. But let me just describe the problem to you guys as James is sharing his screen. So the problem really is with research clinics. When you're doing a study, sponsors or CROs or whoever's managing the logistics, they tend to send you way more kits. And by the way, they send you way more of everything, but kits is like the big culprit here. They'll send you way more lab kits than you'll need, just because they don't want you to run out. So they'd rather you have too many than too few, which I understand because now I run a CRO as well, and I don't want to drop the ball if a site has a patient but then they can't screen because they don't have a kit. So I'd rather give them a bunch of kits and have them drown in kits, uh, as opposed to not getting that patient in. So I understand where the sponsors and CROs coming from, but I also understand as a research clinic, and especially at many of these clinics that don't have the luxury of having that much real estate available to them. I mean, James, I know some clinics that operate within the existing medical practice of a physician or a hospital, and they're only given one or two rooms for research. It's not like they have the entire office to use. And
Right.
guess what's going to fit in that room? Not only all their charts, papers, computers, source documents, reg binders, which by the way take up a lot of space, but all these lab kits, right? And it's not just the little boxes, it's the shipping boxes that the lab kits come with, which are huge, and you just kind of stack them up into the ceilings. I know some people run out of space that put them in the actual ceiling. I mean, they just put them wherever they can. I know at one of my clinics, I would put them in the attic, uh, and we had a pretty big office. So that's the problem Slope is trying to solve is, hey, there's got to be a smarter way to do this. And so James is actually going to talk with us a little bit about that. So go ahead, James.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Dan. And you're exactly right. Slope originally started, and we were actually involved on some of the kitting side, but it was from the just-in-time delivery perspective, where we would send a kit for a single patient, for a single visit, for a single time point, and that was it. And the intent there was to solve the same exact problem of providing too many supplies, providing 100 of some kit, and then the enrollment ends up being lower than what somebody was expecting, and the kits expire, and you have to throw them away, or you end up having to store them for 6 months or 8 months. And you just don't have the space when you're running a bunch of trials. And so we were in a position where we were able to talk directly with a lot of our sites and site coordinators. And what we realized is that the problem, while it's endemic, it's also a little bit more of a higher level problem than just providing only what you need for a given patient. It was a much bigger issue related to just the ability to have visibility on what you have in your site, what is about to expire, and then how many are usable. So it's a pretty simple vision from a certain level, but ultimately tying all that together on the back end is where it really kind of takes away from the strengths of people, because we're not particularly always good at maintaining a spreadsheet or keeping track of a piece of paper so that you can manage an inventory for months or years. And so computers, though, are really great at that. And so when we took a couple of steps back, we realized that the real missing piece of this puzzle was just a straightforward platform for tracking inventory. And you can break it out by trial. You can assign it storage locations. You can upload some of the data if you already have it in a spreadsheet. And you can also invite team members. So if you have a technician, you can delegate certain responsibilities down to them so they can help track this as well. And so it reduces the overall burden on the site coordinator, a CRA or whoever is at a much higher level trying to manage this stuff. And so we took that experience, came up with some fundamental workflows that are generally applicable to what we feel like is most sites. And then we built a platform around that to enable this to be managed. And so within our platform, we kind of start with what we call the trials. And so it's been interesting to us that because there seem to be so few tools that are easy to use for sites, we've seen some interesting use cases where, we intended this to be a trial, right? So we could come in and let's say that we want to look at this trial and see what inventory we have and where all of that inventory is located. Wait for that to load. What we can do is we can look at our summary dashboard for any trial. We can see how many items are available to use, how many are at risk of expiring in the next 30 days, how many of these have we used for that trial, and then how many are unusable. And in this case, unusable can be anything from something that has been damaged, it's been lost, or it's expired. So as we get this to load,
So
Um,
now, are all of these things different studies, like Megabio, MPC? Are those supposed to be different protocols?
yes, so these were intended to be different trial protocols. Um, but one of the things that we've seen that's interesting is some of the use cases people have been adding in site equipment, they've been adding in bulk supplies, and
Huh.
so
So they've been
so
hacking.
yeah, so they're hacking this. One of the things that we also have found is that, you know, if you're a site, let's say that you're a single site, but you have multiple buildings, right? And
Mhm.
so we one of the features that we add is the ability to put your inventory into storage areas. And so you can go over, you know, and click on the storage areas. These are all of the storage areas that we have assigned, and you can see it's just a different view of similar data, right? So we can go over to Debbie's office, let's say, or let's go over here to building 12, um, and we can go in and we can see what inventory is there. And so from an inventory management or control perspective, it's very straightforward to be able to go in and look at that.
So
So
you can theoretically put the different kits you have in different locations within the site, and then you'll know where they are and how many you have and that kind of
right,
thing.
right, yeah, and so this is so I'm getting through where evidently my wireless connection is causing some issues. So I do apologize for the delay in this.
Oh, that's okay. So not only can you look by trials, but you could look by storage area in the site and see where the kits, because usually at one of my sites, we'll just have all the kits in one place. But I guess
Right,
for different studies, you can have the kits somewhere else. I mean, we always had a room where we would store our kits, but when it would overflow, we would have to look for other locations to store them.
right, yeah. So tell you what, I may have to close this out. Tell you what, why don't we? I'm going to have to close this out and start over. I'm not sure why the internet is causing a problem back here.
Oh, that's okay.
Let's see. Just a moment. Let me bring this back up. So I did shift. I had to shift around to a new wireless connection, um,
Okay.
and yeah, it's always fun to do that when you're live.
Yeah, we used to have the worst Wi-Fi connection ever at one of my clinics where we happen to do most of our webinars. Probably for about 2 years we've had to deal with it, and now it's just fantastic. But we've had to wait 2 years for that, so we've had tons of webinars where the audio was choppy and things weren't working. So this is fine. This is no big deal. And while James is leaving and coming back. So okay, so so sites have been actually hacking this for their equipment as well.
Okay, Dan, are you still there?
Yeah, here we go, James. So I was gonna say, sites have been using this not only to track their kits, but also their own equipment that they have. We may have lost James again. I think another good use case for this would be tracking your equipment calibration. if there was a way to do that. So when James gets back on, I'm going to ask him about that. And if anyone has questions about lab kit supply, I mean, this is a issue for CRAs as well. One of the things CRAs need to do, amongst the hundreds of things CRAs need to do, is also make sure that the sites have enough lab kits to perform the study. But CRAs rarely have time to do that, so it's kind of just left up to chance. And again, the sponsors and CROs, the way they combat that is they just send way more kits than the site could ever possibly need, and then they all expire at the same time. So there's a lot of waste as well, which we didn't even get into really, James, is the waste that goes on at these sites when the kits expire.
Right. Yeah, and we were at the ACRP 2018 conference just a week ago, and it was really incredible talking to people about the amount of waste. One of the things that's interesting, we're actually working on a feature to incorporate a donate option through our platform, and the reason is that the amount of waste is such a problem that the people feel bad for going in and just throwing everything away, and so some of the comments were around using donation options for local veterinary clinics that may be able to use some of these things. There are also some conversations around donating some of the not-for-profits like Doctors Without Borders. And so, it's really incredible to look at something like this and see that waste is such a huge issue.
Yeah, that's one of the big. We used to donate them to missions, medical missions that would go to third world countries. So they actually needed those kits. So rather than destroying them, which I don't even know if we were allowed to do, we just donated them to medical missions because we felt bad about wasting all these kits. I mean, these are expensive,
Right.
and it could make or break someone. Like it could make or break the medical mission for an organization when they go out and they need more kits to draw people's blood to see if what conditions they have. So that's a really good idea. Another use case when your internet went out, because I find it very interesting that the sites kind of hacked it already and are using it to track their equipment. Another cool thing would be, and it probably strays away from your core competency, but a way to track the calibration logs for the equipment. Because sites keep calibration logs, but they're usually in a paper binder somewhere, and they're rarely looked at. I mean, there's stickers. There's supposed to be calibration stickers on the medical equipment, so it's right there in front of you. But as study coordinators, CRAs, we become blind to those things. If we had something that we're already using, and we were able to track calibration expirations, just the FYI for you guys, that could be something that sites would actually use. Maybe
Right. And
you guys can consider that.
yeah, and we actually are. We've been having some planning conversations around some different options, and of course one way to do that is you can just make a platform that everybody enters whatever text they want in, but when it comes to a data platform, it makes it challenging to really leverage the full power of a software platform if you're trying to connect things that are very personal like that. So we've been talking about, adding some tags to it. So you can add a tag. You can select if you want to display, let's say, an expiration date, a lot number, or a certification date. And so my internet's back up, and I've shared the screen again.
Okay.
So to take you
James,
through,
before we get there, so we never mentioned, and I'm not even sure if this is still the case, but this is free for sites, right?
Yeah, it is. So free for sites. The first question we get asked is, okay, what's the catch? When will you make it not free for sites? And the answer is that's not going to happen. We are free for sites. There are no plans and no conversations of it being anything other than free for sites.
Okay, very good.
So yeah, and that's a great question. And again, the real reason to kind of take this to the screen share, let's say that this is the MegaBio 5 example trial. And as we scroll through, these are intended to represent different lab kits. So you can see, we give you a dashboard to see how many are ready, how many are at risk of expiring within the next 30 days on a rolling basis, how many you've used recently, and how many are unusable. And you can keep rolling through and see, all of the different alerts. You can also look at a complete listing of everything that's aggregated. You can look at it by storage areas. We've also added some ability. You can change things within the app. So if you need to change the serial number of that one, you can do it. Same thing if you want to change the storage area. All you have to do is just click the drop down, and there you go. So that's, some places may not run into a situation where they have to relocate storage items very often. But I know that we've talked to some where they don't have a dedicated storage space. And so the storage space is wherever they can find room to make it. And so in that case, if somebody's office changes, then they have to relocate all the supplies that are there. So to your question earlier, though, like site equipment would be a good example of that, where you can track a certain piece of equipment, say an autoclave or a liquid nitrogen pump, centrifuge, or let's say temperature monitors. And if we click through to this piece of equipment, then what you'll end up seeing is we have gone in and you can set the expiration date to be the certification or the calibration date. So like in this case, I haven't set those up, but we can set it for 2019 September 24th, and there you go. So as soon as you get within the 30-day window, it'll give you an update.
Yeah, this is great. I would have like an intern or a research assistant or a receptionist, whatever your setup is at your clinic, I would have them do this and maintain it, because it's only as good as maintaining it, right? Like if you have slope but you're not inputting the data, it's not going to do you much good. You've got to continue to maintain the equipment, the expiration dates when you get new lab kits coming in. So I would have an assistant do this. Have you guys found that coordinators themselves are actually using this?
Yeah, without a question. And so, so again, to kind of go around to some of the use cases, we've actually had some coordinators that instead of assigning storage areas, they've actually gone and their storage areas are their staff and team members, so that they're using it to assign areas of responsibility. And so from that point of view, it provides an easy way for a coordinator to look at a specific person and see what kits or what supplies they're responsible for maintaining. And so that's that was actually a very interesting use hack that we found pretty early on, actually.
Yeah, and people who are not familiar or just learning research may be thinking, well, why is it important that I know how many kits I have? Well, it's extremely important that you know not only how many kits you have left, but when they expire, because if you use an expired kit, I've done this before, I'm afraid to admit, that data is not good. That's a protocol deviation. The subject probably will be allowed to continue in the study, but it definitely does not look good for an FDA audit. The sponsor's not happy because they can't use that data. The patient's not happy because they got to come in again and get poked again. Nobody's happy. So these things are important. They seem like trivial matters, but they're extremely important. Another thing I hate to admit is having a screening, having a patient come in and then not having the kits, right? So these are important things. I mean, this translates directly into revenue for the sites.
Well, yeah, revenue and enrollment, and of course, with all of the data that's out there from from other companies that we've seen, and I'm sure you're familiar with, companies that'll go out and help sponsors target certain sites based on enrollment and based on other statistics, performance statistics, that is. Having missed enrollment opportunities or having deviations, it can not only impact that single event, but it could potentially impact your ability to become a participant in future trials.
Right. Yeah, that too.
So so one of the things along with that, we have a team portal here that kind of helps that, and it helps with the tracking of responsibility and use as well. And so obviously these are example users, but as far as like you mentioned, protocol deviations or audit trails of who did what and when did they do it to a kit.
Mhm.
One of the things that's nice is when we're looking at a kit, and let's say this is an example, I go in and I use this kit, then I can go over and select from this drop down that I used it. And so that one kit now has as part of this audit trail that I used it on this date. And with our ability to add teams, you can see exactly who it was. So and you can also assign your team members to any given trial, so they can have access to all of your trials, or they can have access to only certain trials. So that's one of the things that we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback on, is the ability to have that electronic audit trail and validate what kit was used, who used it, when it was used, and that you can also validate that it was not expired based on the data that's in the system.
Gotcha. Okay. And sites can sign up for this where?
Yeah, so they can just go to slope.io. That'll take you to our homepage. You can look around there, and then there are several links that will take you to the sign up platform.
Yeah.
Once you sign up and make it in, we've been very interested to see the use of it. Most of the sites are up and running, I would say, within 15 to 20 minutes. And of course, that depends on how much they have in stock. But most of our users are up and running with a trial uploaded, supplies entered, and everything tracking, within less than a half hour easily.
I gotcha. And what is so, sites might be skeptical, like, why is this free? How long is it going to be free? Is it a freemium thing? And I know the answer because I've talked to Rust, but, you know, what is your answer to that objection?
Sure. So for us, giving the sites a tool so that they can manage and control their inventory and take ownership of that, from stopping waste, helping them optimize their storage locations, and get back to the business of focusing on patients, that's what's driving our interest in providing a free platform for site. Now we're working on platform for CROs and sponsors. That platform would obviously be part of a paid service. But what that is intended to do is that would provide the sponsor, the CRO, CRA, the ability to go and look at the entire ecosystem of trials that they manage, and then they can drill down to any given site and see what inventory is there, see if any of it is at risk of expiring or is expired. We also provide low inventory alerts, so that way you don't run the risk of running out and causing a problem with not being able to have kits on site for patient visits or enrollment. And so that's part of the higher level paid service, and that also is going to incorporate drug tracking and interface with drug depots.
Very good. And I think we forgot to mention that CRAs actually can have access to the site's supply kits. So when they're on site, that's one less thing they have to do is look at the lab kits and count the kits. They can just go on this portal and look it up whenever they want to.
Yeah, yeah, they can look at the portal, and then also you have the option to receive weekly emails. And so the emails, they don't provide you with a complete listing of everything in your inventory that would just be overwhelming. It only provides you with a list of items that are at risk of expiring or items that have a low inventory alert. So it's email that is dedicated to being turned into actions that you need to take, and not just additional information that gets blasted into an email account.
Mm-hmm. And as of this webinar, we're now in May. For everyone watching in the future, this is May 8th, 2018. Just for social proof, how many sites are currently using this?
Yeah, so we're at several hundred sites right now. I think we're a little shy of 1,000 trials. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, getting 100 of anyone to do anything, even if it's free, is a challenge. Were you at ACRP, James?
Yes, we were. Yeah, and so Rust and Michael and I were all at ACRP, and it was great to see some of our early adopters, and it was actually very satisfying to see some of our early adopters come by and bring some of their contacts and say, "Hey, you got to see these guys. You need to go sign up. It's a terrific platform."
Right.
So not from a sales pitch standpoint, but just from knowing that there's a platform that actually people are finding value in
Yeah.
is really, it's a great feeling.
I think this is great. I think, again, my only objection, it's not really an objection, it's more of an internal process that my sites would have to resolve, but I already know, some of my coordinators are so busy. If I had them do one more thing, like track kits, right? Like enter kits as they come, monitor expirations, I think I would get some resistance from them. So that's why I
Right.
was mentioning the research assistant, or just designate someone to do this. And then
Yeah.
you, as the site director, stay on top of them and make sure that they're doing it. Or you yourself do it as the site director. I mean, that's one way to make sure that it gets accomplished and you guys are compliant with it, because it's only as good as the data you'll put in. So
Right.
from those hundreds of people, let's say 100 sites, how many are actually active users? Do you have those numbers?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at about I think it's in the mid 80, let's just say 85%
That's
of
fantastic.
adherence to data that they have already entered, which is phenomenally high. Um,
Yeah, I would expect like
it's-
50% maybe.
yeah, and that I think it all ties in, at least from what we've been able to interpret. It ties in a lot to your comments on time. And one of the ways that the system is really set up is that you don't have to go in and do something every time you touch a kit, right? You don't have to go in and mark it as used at that very instant. It's great if you can, but workflows and schedules, they rarely are really able to be fully optimized in a clinical setting. And
Yeah.
so, at least for something like this. And so, some of the use cases, would be, we've seen some people that would print out a list of their kits. And let's say that I come in on a Monday and I pick up my list and I just mark them off as I use them. And then at the end of a week, I hand it off to a technician or to an admin, and then they go in and mark them as used, because we have a bulk select and edit feature. You don't have to go in, let's say if you use 100 kits, you don't have to do 100 individual items. You can just select 100 of them and then just do a single action to mark them as used. So there's some hacks that we've built into it that really help make
Mm-hmm.
this process much easier to use and much quicker. And just a quick comment, on the time it takes to adopt something like this. We had we had quite a few conversations at ACRP, and the same comment that you made was brought up of, well, I just don't have time to do it, and and that's a perfectly understandable comment. But it was interesting when we asked, well, how are you managing inventory now? The majority of the time, the comment was, well, we don't. We just go in and
Yeah.
get what's there. And so, from that scenario, if you look at an improvement process, um, our platform doesn't require that you upload everything you have at one time. You could start with a single trial, a single kit, and just begin to do, let's say you do one kit a week that takes you 3 or 4 minutes to add. And so from that standpoint, it's a low impact on time. It's not the end result, but it's a process improvement that gets you on the path to taking control of your inventory and being able to go and help reduce the waste. So so there's some ways that we can go in. Like I mentioned, we're going to begin a weekly webinar ourselves that'll be talking through some of this, where we say, hey, you can come over here. Here's a use case you may not have thought about. It'd be live questions and things like that. So so people might find that helpful if they're a little intimidated by getting into a new data system.
Absolutely, and these are important things for any. I know we get a lot of other vendors watching, and we've talked to so many other vendors that their strategy is to get sites to use something, and then they'll charge the sponsors or CROs once they have proof of concept that sites are using it. But sponsors are not so much concerned with money as they are with, will my sites use this, or
Right.
is this just another thing that they have to do? Because there's already an average of 12 vendors per study. So if there's enough value add, this you're onto something. And there's certainly no one that has tackled this before, and it is a problem. So it's admirable what you guys are doing. I was telling Rust, I think it's a fantastic idea. And it'll be interesting to see some of the use cases and then some of the feedback from the sites using it, and as well as the CRAs. So we'll keep an eye on you guys. And you guys have a podcast, right? And you have your own webinars coming up.
That's correct. Yeah. So the webinars will be posting more information out on that. Right now, we're going to be doing that to our existing users, and then we'll be doing some public webinars. And then Rust has the podcast Drowning in Research, which has gotten a lot of very positive responses. So he's going to continue to do that.
Slope.io for anyone interested. That is the website. We'll have links underneath this on YouTube. If there's no questions from the audience, feel free to contact me and I will get you in touch with James. James, are you on LinkedIn as well?
Yes, I am. So just James Irvin at LinkedIn, and and I have Slope. You can also just search Slope, and I'm there on LinkedIn as well.
There you go. So anyone have questions, reach out to me or James. And thank you everyone for attending, watching, listening. And James, we'll have you on again to follow up. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Bye bye.